Okay. All right. So it looks like I think we're ready. All right. So as I said earlier, for all of you, thank you all of you for being here. This is our first webinar of the year. Terrific year upcoming. 2024 is just, I think, going to be a gigantic year for us and for all of you. And so we hope that we can provide you with the information you need this year to really set your community community-oriented work, ablaze in your prospective cities. My name is Vincent Medley. I am the Human Animal Support Services, the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Director. Let me give you a few things that I need to read directly from the screen as housekeeping for this webinar. So at the bottom of the Zoom, you'll see a Q&A option. Please use the Q&A to submit any questions you have for the panelists to ensure we see your questions. Otherwise, sometimes people put it in the chat, and we'll ask you if you put it in the chat to please put it in the Q&A, because that's how we track. In order to chat with each other, please use the blue drop down in your chat box and switch it to everyone. Please keep your chat on topic and kind. Just make sure we're having a fun and interactive conversation, but feel free to put what you feel like is applicable to this talk today. And also, just to back up a little bit on the Q&A, we use that Q&A box to make sure we answer all of your questions, which I will do the best I can to get to everyone's questions. But then it also helps us track the questions that have been asked during the webinar. So can use that Q&A box. Also, the webinar recording will be emailed within 3 days. If you can't find it, check your spam or visit humananimalsupportservices.org. And then lastly, please stay tuned to fill out a brief survey at the very end of the webinar. All right, now let me introduce tonight's topic and presenters. In tonight's webinar, which is Sheltering Beyond Shelters, Housing Justice Advocacy and its Role in Animal Welfare, we will hear from 3 incredibly accomplished panelists. To start, I would like to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and share about how you got into this work, and then also, and then to start off, let's start off with Lauren. And Lauren, you pick who's after you.
Great, thank you, Vincent, and thanks so much to everybody for being here tonight. I'm Lauren Loney. I'm a staff attorney and policy specialist at Haas. And I am so excited about this webinar. I love this topic. I think it's so important, and I'm so grateful for Megan and Ben agreeing to join us and share their expertise. Are we supposed to answer the question about how we got here now, or is that next?
No, you can, yeah, just give us give us a paragraph on how you got here.
My little elevator pitch is I started right out of law school as an environmental justice legal fellow at University of Texas School of Law, and got pulled into an affordable housing project in the low-income housing tax credit program, and it completely changed the trajectory of my intended career path. I learned about all of the issues in affordable housing and tenants' rights. I ended up joining Texas Housers and worked with them for about a year until I finally realized that what I love the most is this intersectional space between housing issues, tenants' rights, and the human-animal bond, and protecting our families and protecting animals from being relinquished to animal shelters because of our systemic housing issues. And ever since then, it's been a bit of a love affair, professionally and personally. And I'm so thrilled for Megan and Ben to join us and help us make these connections. So Megan, I'll toss it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Yes, same as Lauren. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Megan Collup. I use they, them pronouns, and I am in Colorado. I work with Colorado Legal Services currently as a licensed clinical social worker. So I came into this work One, because of my love of animals. I've always had pets in my home. And during grad school, I joined the IHAC community and was able to get a certificate in animal assisted social work and really like engage in what that human animal bond is. And then outside of that, once I've graduated, I've been able to work one-on-one more in a micro way with clients and individuals who want pets or have pets in housing, or they're homeless and need access to resources for pets. And now I work for a civil legal aid organization where I am working with individuals that are facing evictions. So really relevant to the topics that we're talking about today. And I come alongside the attorneys and the paralegals to help clients really find the resources that they need. So while the legal team works on all the legal stuff, I get the opportunity to find out what other resources clients need, which often includes resources for their pets, like food, training options for them, as well as housing for pets for very unfortunate circumstances as well. So that's kind of short and brief what I do. I'll explain a little bit more in just a second, but I'll let Ben go now.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here with you today. My name is Ben Martin. I am the research director at Texas Housers. We're an organization that works across the state of Texas to ensure that low-income Texans have access to decent and affordable housing in a neighborhood of their choice. So I really come at this from the tenants' rights and affordable housing, low-income housing perspective. I hope that everyone will be patient with me today because I may be the person on the call with the least experience in animal welfare. So I'm here to share, and I am also here to learn and help explore the bridge between our two worlds together. As I was listening to Lauren talk about how she got into this work, it dawned on me that not only do we have a very similar trajectory, but we may actually even share a mentor that pushed us into low-income housing world at UT Law. My background is in urban planning, and so I was really interested in the decisions that are made in our cities and regions that determine what the built environment around us looks like. And as I got deeper and deeper into that work, I realized that a lot less attention is paid to ensuring that all people have access to the same benefits that the most privileged among us have access to. That work led me over and over again to housing and low-income housing. And so the organization that Lauren mentioned working at before, Texas Housers, is where I'm at now doing research and advocacy. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all. I'll let you get into your presentation. Someone did ask Megan if you could repeat your degree and where it was from.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't actually say that. So I have a master's degree in social work from the University of Denver, as well as a certificate from there in animal assisted social work.
Sweet. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now I will pass the floor over to the panel for their presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vincent.
You're welcome.
All right. So again, I'm Megan Collop. I am very excited to be here and talk about my experience working with individuals with pets as well as the law. I think it's really important that these discussions are happening. And so I'm very excited that I learned about the Human Animal Support Services organization this last fall so that I can be part of this. So thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for that. So you guys I already just gave a little bit of some information about myself. You can see pictures of animal interactions that I have had and experiences that I've been part of. My dog is at the top. He is Bernie Sanders. He is a failed therapy animal because he cannot pass one portion of the therapy test because he can't be away from me. As a shelter dog, he just wants to be close by. So he is I try to bring him into work when I can to provide assistance to and emotional support to attorneys and lawyers, as well as our clients when I can. But he is not certified as a therapy animal. I have taken additional classes, learning more about the human and animal connection, including therapy type services. I have 12 years of direct experience working with low income, unhoused, and vulnerable individuals. Many of those individuals have been part of the court systems as well. So for 8 years, I did work directly with clients that were in court for various things, such as homeless crimes, which are as well as people that were facing competency hearings, so they were not able to attend their trial because they were incompetent according to the courts. Um, I work with in excuse me. I work with people in their homes as well as in the community when I did this work. And so for my clients that were unhoused, I would make sure that they were connected to mobile vet services, vaccines, as well as any pet supplies that they might need. I led my previous place of work in developing a standardized way to identify which clients would benefit from a pet or an emotional support animal, as well as ensuring that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So I set up an entire process with that, including setting up pet crisis plans, ensuring the clients understand their responsibilities, as well as knowing the rights of animals that will come into their homes. Um, I'm currently working in civil legal aid. I've done that for about 1.5 years. And like I said before, I am working with individuals facing eviction. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Of course, I like to repeat myself. So, again, when working with the homeless, the biggest things were finding pet food pantries, mobile vets, low income or free clinics, as well as educating partners regarding service animals. So we often would put clients up in motels, especially during the winter um, when it is very cold and the shelters are full. So individuals that go to the motels that have service animals were often turned away, despite service animals having a lot of protections. And so I would do a lot of education with partnering motels and hotels to ensure that they would allow our clients who have specifically service animals into their facilities. Some of them would also accept emotional support animals, and so I would guide them in that as well. I do really believe in the pet crisis plan. I think that is actually the most important thing that we really did when working with my unhoused and low income individuals. It was really developing a plan so that clients know what to do when they are experiencing an emergency, as well as when their pet is experiencing an emergency. So it ensures the safety of all parties involved, and to make sure that the animal is not left to the wayside or not getting the treatment or the care that it needs. We also educated property owners as we moved clients into their buildings, because a lot of property owners didn't understand what emotional support animals were, what the process was for becoming an emotional support animal, and how to work with clients that do have ESAs. Go ahead, next slide. While in legal services, I have dealt with quite a few cases with clients that are dealing with animals. Right when I started, my very first case was working with an individual who she had 2 large dogs in her home. One of them had unfortunately bit somebody else, and so she was in legal proceedings about that. And she was very concerned about taking her pets outside of her home to allow them to get exercise, use the restroom, or anything that they might need. And so she was actually keeping them inside, these 2 large dogs, trying to use puppy pads to allow them to relieve themselves. And then she was causing additional smells and things in the apartment. With that client, I was able to actually work with her to identify her concerns about the dog. Her attorney helped her engage in training for herself and her dogs so that they can have proper etiquette when going out in the public, as well as we connected the client to resources so that she can get muzzles for her dogs, so that she can feel comfortable bringing them outside and that no one would be able to accuse her of causing harm to them. I also this fall worked with another client who actually she had 14 cats in her home. Her cats had kittens in March of last year, and then or no, I'm sorry. Well, her cats did have kittens in March of last year, which added more kittens, and then she had more this fall. She ended up being locked out of her house with those 14 cats in her home, and we were not able to assist her to get access to her home for 2 weeks. There was a lot of concerns about the animal's welfare when we entered the home. So I offered to go with the client and I assisted her with her pets once she was at home. And so I ensured that luckily all of them survived that time. So that was wonderful. I was able to get her some food for her pets and talk to her about what it means to take care of 14 cats. And within about 2 weeks, she had made the decision that she's not able to care for that many cats. It was causing her housing instability. There was a lot of complaints about smells, again, in her unit. And I was able to transport 12 of those cats, plus about 4 newborns that were actively being born on the way to Dumb Friends League, which is a animal shelter in Colorado. And so I delivered about 14 cats there with the ones that were being born actively on the way. And so in that way, we were helping the animals ensure their safety because our client was not able to care for them. And I was able to have a discussion with the cat, and she understood that she was doing what was the most responsible thing as a pet owner. And with this, we were able to get her a longer stay in her apartments, which was wonderful. Unfortunately, she was not able to keep that apartment, but we have been able to keep her with her 2 cats that she decided to keep. So that is just amazing.
I have a few. There are a
Yeah, go
few,
ahead, Vincent.
Megan. There are a few questions that the panel that are in the question box. So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a few of them to you right now. Lynn Scott asked, "What are your thoughts on adopting animals out to homeless persons?"
That's a really good question. And I know a lot of people might have different views than I do, but I actually think people who are unhoused are often the best pet owners, and they keep their animals much safer than than people that are housed do. And I feel like that bond is amazing. I don't know if shelters would actually rent out to people that are homeless, but I do believe um, that those that are unhoused should be able to have pets. Now they have to be able to care for them. They have to know how to take care of them. And so that is a big thing. And you'll see at the end, one of the opportunities I think we have is to increase the number of social workers that are actually at shelters and adoption agencies. So social workers can actually provide education to clients as well and ensure that the pets and the humans are a good fit. I know shelters have wonderful people working in them. Social workers just come from a different lens, and I think that can help ensure that pets are going to a safe home.
All right, thank you. Roberta Humans asks, "Do you write the letters that say that individuals need emotionally support animals yourself, or do you prefer them to be therapists or psychologists to get those letters?"
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Roberta. So I currently in my current job in legal aid, I refer those clients out to be able to get the emotional support letter. That is because I am not the individual's primary therapist. I work with people for a very limited period of time, so I might not be able to assess it fully and ensure that this would be a good connection. So I refer out currently to other therapists. In my previous role working with the homeless, I would write those letters myself. I also would inform the client that I always had the option to revoke these letters if for some reason that there was a danger to the pet or the animal due to client's behavior.
And then one last question, and is from Michael. He asked, was neutering discussed with client of 14 cats, or was that a separate issue?
That has been discussed with the client. Absolutely. The client does want to neuter and spay her two cats that she currently has. Unfortunately, this client does have significant mental health problems and physical problems that prevent her from communicating really well with us. And so it's been a slow process to get that set up for her. But yes, the plan is for her cats to be neutered and spayed to ensure that she does not put herself or her animals in that situation again.
All right, that's all the questions we have for now.
I'm looking at Cynthia's question that just came in.
Oh, okay.
Cynthia
You want me to read
Negron
that for you?
mentioned attending a training where clients write their own ESAS letters. That is not something I have ever heard of clients doing. There is specific information that needs to be put into it. And I would not have my clients write an ESA letter because it is my license that I'm writing onto that.
All right. And then from Sherry Boyette, I am interested in the use of muzzles on dogs that have a bite history, liability, education, existing videos on training for use. I think she's asking if there is what the liability is if an animal isn't muzzled. How do you educate people whose dog may need to be muzzled, and then any existing videos for training?
Sure. Unfortunately, I don't know of any existing videos for training. If I do, I'll try to do a little research so that I can possibly send that out to you. I don't encourage muzzle use because I for animals that do not need it, I don't think all dogs need a muzzle. I think it is all about how that animal interacts when around other people. So if the animal is perfect in the home but is aggressive or territorial outside of the home, and there is a threat of them biting someone or attacking another dog, that's when I would encourage the use of a muzzle to ensure that they do not lose that bond by having a criminal case where that dog did bite someone. And so it's often a mitigation tool as well when talking from attorney to attorney regarding somebody's housing. So we can actually say, hey, opposing counsel, we are getting our client a muzzle so that they're able to ensure that their dog does not bite anyone in the future. Can this be, as long as they continue to use this muzzle, can they continue to live there and continue to have their animal? And so that's how we use the muzzles. So it's not an everyday thing.
Sweet. And have you used grants specifically for spay neuter surgery in the past? If so, which ones are preferred?
I haven't used grants for that. And because we do have quite a few organizations in Colorado that do free spay and neutering. So we always refer people out to those programs for that type of service because they can get it for free.
Sweet. And then how would you develop a policy to encourage shelters to place animals with a homeless person?
Sure. I mean, it's a big ask. And I think shelters should bring in pets and animals to it. But I also know like when in a congregate setting, that's very difficult. So I don't know I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what type of policies we should put in. I'm also, due to where I work and legal things, I'm not able to provide information for advocacy or policies. But what I would say is that there needs to be a lot more discussions about what sheltering might mean, because maybe sheltering means something different when it comes to pets. So maybe that means finding more funding for motels or hotels that accept pets versus putting people in a congregate shelter. Maybe it's finding, building out an apartment, like it used to be an apartment complex or a motel, and using that as a shelter so people have individual rooms. And those are the types of things that I would recommend going forward.
Sweet.
I-
All right.
All right.
That
I
is
do want to be
all the
cognizant.
questions.
Perfect. Thank you so
Yes.
much. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, Vince. um, all right, so I want to be cognizant of time, so I'm going to keep moving along. So current barriers that we see. So these are barriers. I reached out to all of the attorneys and the paralegals in my office, actually in the state of Colorado, for Colorado Legal Services, to help me identify the types of cases that we get that relate to animals in the home. Because I focus specifically on eviction, I wanted to ensure that I hit other areas that in civil legal aid that we see concerns with pets in the home. So as we've been talking about, housing has been difficult. So if your client is, or if the animal is not an emotional support animal, you have to be able to find housing that allows pets in it. You also have to be cognizant of pet rent and pet deposits, because even somebody who is on a voucher or in low income housing, they could still have their lease say that they have a very high pet rent or pet deposit. There's good things coming down the line in Colorado about that. But housing is not available in Colorado, let alone if you have a pet, it's much more difficult. Domestic violence. We do not have domestic violence shelters that allow animals in it. And so often people who are facing domestic violence don't leave the relationship or their home for fear of leaving their animal there and the animal being abused, or because they just have that connection and their animal is family and they want to have them with them. So people do end up not going to shelters and continuing to be in those negative situations because of that. We've had a few what we call warranty of habitability problems, and that's when your apartment or your home is not up to standards. And so mold has been a really big one. And so we've had one client who needed to leave her home temporarily so they can remove the black mold from her home. But the place that her landlord was offering her to stay temporarily did not allow animals. So instead of actually doing that, she decided to stay in the home with mold. And so her and her pet continue to be sick because of this, because she does not want to give up her animal to do this. Nursing homes. Many nursing homes that accept Medicaid or Medicare don't allow animals in it. So people are reluctant to go into a nursing home or assisted living home because of this, when they could use those services. And so I think we need more of those facilities to allow animals in and to recognize what that human animal bond is and how it can really help somebody that is in a nursing home. Hospitalizations. We do have a client that currently will not go into the hospital and she needs to be hospitalized to be stabilized, but there is nowhere for her pet to go. And so she is not getting that medical care for herself. And then the last thing goes back to the behavioral training, especially when you're thinking about clients that do have pets when they're on the street. Those pets are trained in a different way than they're trained if they are brought into a home from the beginning. So street animals often are a little more protective of their owners, of their space, and it could lead to behavioral problems at their new apartment. Go ahead and go to the next slide. But good things are on the horizon. So what's really cool is that Colorado Legal Services is recognizing the human-animal connection. And one of the reasons they did bring me on here and social workers on here, social workers have only been in civil legal aid in Colorado for about 1.5 years or 2 years. So this is a new thing as well, is because we can help work with these clients and their families. So there's a lot of opportunities for social workers to enter the animal welfare field. That could be for advocacy, for animal welfare on the local, state, and national level, engaging in legal services related to the human-animal connection. So although me and my team are here for civil legal aid, there's also, criminal cases that come up regarding animals, and how awesome would it be for a social worker to come alongside those cases and help there as well. I also think that continuing to participate in professional development opportunities to learn more about animal welfare and how it connects to social work values is really important. And I think that will entice more organizations and companies to bring social workers on, or a position similar to ours. Colorado has at least two, and actually I found a third and a fourth one today, programs that will shelter animals for humans that are in a vulnerable situation. The difficulty with those is that the shelters have to have a space for these pets, or there has to be a foster family available to take these animals. They're also limited to about 30 days. And so there could be, if somebody needs to be hospitalized longer, or if somebody is in jail longer, that could lead to some problems. But it's wonderful that we do have these optional problems. Colorado also engages in pet food pantries and vet clinics. And as of January 1, Colorado has capped pet rent and pet deposits, which is just amazing. So I'm very excited to let you all know about that. So what's next? Yes. So continuing to educate pet owners, landlords, and the legal community about the importance of pets. Developing ways for domestic violence survivors to be able to keep their animals while moving outside of the home. Bringing social workers into shelters to engage potential and current pet owners about best practices in having a pet in the home. Bringing social workers into veterinary practices. It could also be a very innovative idea. We all get emotional when our pets are going through medical problems as well. And how great would it be to have a social worker there as well? They can also provide education or grief or bereavement services for when a pet passes away. I think we need to find a link, or find funding to link people to behavioral training programs. So all of the behavioral training programs for animals and humans that I know of do cost money. And so it's difficult for low income individuals to be able to pay for those programs. And finally, educating the medical and mental health providers about emotional support animals and best practices, because some medical providers do just write the letters without inquiring further about a client's ability to take care of the animal, as well as what they would do in a crisis. And so that is the end of my presentation. Thank you all, and I really look forward to answering any more questions you have.
We will save the rest of the questions for the end,
Perfect.
Megan. But thank you very much. This was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I will pick up from here. The point of this part of the presentation, again, I'm coming from a low-income housing background. And so if from an animal welfare perspective, you're curious about getting involved in housing issues, I hope that this will kind of provide a broad context of the types of challenges that low-income people face when it comes to housing, and to provide a sense of the types of issues that low-income housing advocates and community leaders are working on. And then I will then pass it to Lauren to kind of connect all of these pieces together. A lot of these examples are Texas focused. Some of them will be Texas focused. I try to draw back nationally, but state by state, there are very different contexts for tenants' rights in low-income housing, as it sounds like from the chat, many of you know. So again, our organization supports low-income Texans in their efforts to to access decent and affordable housing in a quality neighborhood of their choice. If we could go to the next slide, I'd like to break apart a few of those elements because sometimes this whole issue gets kind of mushed down into the general term affordable housing, and affordable housing can mean a lot of things. The data show that low-income people are struggling the most with housing affordability, but also a kind of a interconnected web of issues that includes affordability, housing stability, renters' rights, protection from losing their homes, habitability issues. We were just hearing about mold and other poor conditions, and then equity and justice. Ensuring that our housing landscape is free from racial discrimination, that segregation is eradicated, that all people have access to good neighborhoods, good schools, access to opportunity. I'm going to focus on the first two of these and provide a little bit more context today. So next slide, please. We work in a few different areas. So the mechanics of our organization is we work on the ground with tenants and tenant leaders organizing at the property and neighborhood level. We work with tenant leaders in kind of an educational context, bringing leaders from across the state together to grow their knowledge and to scale up their efforts to statewide change. We do a lot of research and policy development. We communicate out about the experience of low-income people and what the data show, what the best practices are in the press and to the public. And then we do advocacy at the local and state level to fight for change. Next slide. So on the issue of low-income affordability, in every single state in the country, which the next slide will show, there is not enough housing for low-income people, especially very low-income people. And what you see here is the number of units available across the country per 100 renters at these different income levels. Extremely low income is 30% of area median income or below. And you can see that there's about a third of the units needed to house all of the folks making those extremely low incomes. Once you get towards about middle income, there's approximate parity or there's about enough housing that's affordable to people. It might not be in the neighborhood of their choice, but for very low and extremely low income people, there just simply aren't enough units that are affordable to them to house them. Next slide, please. And as you can see here, this is the case all across the country. The places that are red, like here in Texas, where I am, the entire West Coast, I apologize if you hear my toddler daughter running around in the background, have 3 units or less for every 10 households, so less than a third of the housing units needed to house the extremely low-income people who live in that state. So we have an undersupply of housing, and that undersupply is severely concentrated among our lowest income neighbors across the country. Next slide. As a result of that, many of those extremely low-income households are paying just incredible amounts of money towards rent. There's a term in housing called housing cost burden. It means you're paying more than a third or more than 30% of your income towards rent and utilities. That's already very high. This category in this pie chart that we're looking at here is actually severe housing cost burden, which means these are folks that are paying more than half of their income towards rent. And the orange is the extremely low income category. These are our lowest income neighbors. 3/4 of them are paying over half of their income towards rent and have not enough money left over for transportation, for food for them, for food for their animals, and for the other necessities of just living a life. So the point of these slides that I really want to get across is that we have a housing crisis across the country. Some of the characteristics of it are different from state to state, but the theme that I really want us all to come away from this is that that crisis is concentrated among our lowest income and most vulnerable neighbors. Next slide, please. And one of the outcomes of that is that these predominantly low-income households are increasingly vulnerable to eviction, involuntary displacement, and then having to either double up, move into housing of last resort, or even lose housing and enter into homelessness. The eviction rate in Texas was ticking up and up and up through the 2010s. The federal government and the court system put a lot of protections and funding in place to lower evictions. And during the pandemic, it worked. The eviction filing rate dropped by about half. And then when those protections ended, we're back to our upward trajectory right now. This is the example of the state of Texas. It's a very similar situation in many states across the country. Next slide, please. As an example, in Houston and Harris County, where Houston is, which is one of the most highest population counties in the country, the eviction rate for the last 12 months was significantly higher than that 100% line, which is the pre-pandemic average. Not only in Harris County, not only have evictions come roaring back, but they're actually higher than they've ever been before. Next slide. And we know the negative impacts on individuals and families of an eviction. This is a well-researched field. People and families who've been evicted have worse employment outcomes, struggle to maintain steady employment. Their financial stability goes down. It extremely impacts their ability to achieve future housing stability, and many of these families, unfortunately, will experience homelessness. It also impacts immediate and long-term health outcomes for all family members. Next slide. Just very quickly, just to get a sense of kind of the patchwork of protections around, I'm kind of zooming out to broader tenant protections now. For something like the landlord being required to provide notice before they enter a person's home. This could be of particular concern for someone who has a pet. There are a number of states in the nation where landlords do not have to provide notice before they enter a home. And then in the next slide, if we can go to that, there are even fewer states that protect against source of income discrimination, meaning for very low and extremely low income households that use vouchers from the federal government in order to afford housing. In these states that are not blue on the map, landlords don't necessarily have to accept that voucher holder and can discriminate against them based on their source of income. Among other things, this often restricts voucher holders and low-income people from accessing housing, and then all of the opportunities that come from being in a high-opportunity neighborhood, like access to schools, good schools, access to jobs, access to transit, access to healthcare. I know in the past, Lauren, and maybe she'll speak on it today, has done some looking into even access to veterinary care. Next slide, please. So just to give a very quick overview of how an organization like ours thinks about responding to situations like this. We do a lot of different activity, but ultimately it comes down to making policy change. As an example, in the last Texas legislative session, about a year ago now, our two priority categories were tenant protections and the provision of low-income housing. Under the tenant protections category, we really focused on eviction prevention because of the proven interventions from the pandemic. We really sought to build on that coming out of the pandemic. But in a state like Texas, unfortunately, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of tenant protections more broadly. And so our agenda really includes protections beyond the eviction process. And then again, voucher holder protections. A lot of this takes money. So one of our big fights last session was we had a huge historic level budget surplus in the state of Texas that the legislature was figuring out how to spend. And we aimed to get some of that money aimed at low income people and their housing needs. to make sure that there is funding for low-income housing, and that that funding is going towards the families and households in our state that really need it the most. Again, those lowest income people, and that that housing allows them access to high quality neighborhoods. Next slide. It's Texas, so we're realistic about what we dream big and we take the wins we can get. We did receive well, the state of Texas allocated funds towards well, new state level funding towards extremely low income housing. That's housing for those households making 30% of area median income and below. We're going to be working to grow that fund. It's not huge right now, but it is a big shift for the state of Texas to put money towards lowest income housing. And in terms of what we were talking about a moment ago regarding discrimination against voucher holders, the state disallowed homeowners associations from blanket discrimination against voucher holders, which was another win. Next slide. We have a lot of obstacles and opportunities too, though. As you saw in those slides that showed the whole diagrams of the whole, or maps of the whole country, there's a real patchwork, and it really depends on kind of the political context of where you're working. Unfortunately, in a state like ours, many statewide lawmakers are not particularly sympathetic to the plights of tenants and low-income people. When they are keyed into the issue of housing, oftentimes attention will be pulled away towards those lowest income housing needs and towards middle income housing needs, where the need isn't quite as severe in terms of losing housing altogether. That's largely because the landlord lobby and developer lobby in the state of Texas is extremely powerful. And conservative states across the country are utilizing the tool of preemption, which means taking back authority from local governments. So what we saw over the 2010s were local governments in the state of Texas starting to extend some of these protections, and then the state government responding by restricting local government's ability to do that and taking back the power to provide some of to make decisions about providing some of those protections from local governments. Just a final thought that I'm going to end on, that it's very important in our work to ensure that the voices of low-income people themselves are right out front in this fight. We're not doing the work if we're not informed by what they're actually experiencing in terms of their housing needs. And so through things like our program for tenant leaders, we really see this as a fight right alongside the people with the greatest need, who are their own fiercest advocates. So I'm excited for Lauren to finish us off and bring all these threads together. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Ben and Megan, for all of that incredible information. I can tell that everybody is super engaged and has lots of questions, and it's wonderful. So I'm gonna run through my slides as quickly as possible so we have time to answer some of these other questions. But this is one of my 3 dogs, Daffodil. And so I just wanted to make the case in the rest of our presentation that going beyond breed and size restrictions, going beyond pet specific policies is a good idea and a good thing to add to your animal welfare advocacy and programmatic agenda. So Katie, if you could actually skip ahead 2 slides. Thank you. So we are really excited to share some preliminary insights to our pet-related intake data. So we are working with a data set of housing-related intake from November 2019 through November 2023, and it's continuing from 20 of our host pilot shelters across the country. And as of November 2023, we have data for more than 28,400 instances of pet relinquishments due to various housing issues. And this is just from 20 shelters. So this is a massive underreporting of what we would expect if we had actual nationwide data. You can see there's been a steady increase in pets relinquished due to housing between 2019 and 2022, with a slight dip in 2023, although it's important to note that we don't have all of our 2023 data in yet. And also, I'm sure y'all could glean this just from being engaged in this work, but that big jump from 2019 to 2020 is mostly likely due to, or can be mostly explained by, increases in data collection and reporting. If there is, in fact, a drop in pets relinquished due to housing issues this year from our pilot shelters, it's going to be really interesting to explore whether there are any relationships between these numbers and any programmatic changes made at our shelters, including things like increasing resources for temporary boarding. Next slide. Data collection related to housing and shelters is still quite inconsistent, and our shelters reported more than 50 different housing related intake reasons in this data set, and that makes it really hard to analyze for trends. So for this preliminary data, I grouped those 50 reasons into 7 different categories, and anytime there was a pet specific issue mentioned, I identified those as pet restrictions, which you can see in that yellow pie chart section there. But what is most noticeable here is that the highest percentages of intake reasons were due to these unspecified moving reasons, with unspecified housing and unspecified landlord conflict making up the next highest chunks of pet relinquishment. And although it's important to note that just because a shelter at this point didn't report a pet specific intake reason, that doesn't mean there wasn't one, right? So there could have been a pet specific reason that got captured in that bucket, but we also shouldn't assume that all the issues, all the relinquishments in those unspecified buckets do stem from a pet specific conflict. Next slide. I'm going to breeze through this section. I wanted to take a look at length of stay as an indicator of the way that housing issues are having a burden or burdening our community's animal services resources. I think it's really interesting to note that while dogs do make up a slim majority of pets relinquished by species, cats make up 37%. And if you look at the length of stay for animals, for dogs and cats across the board, while the average for dogs is slightly higher, for in the middle range and for most of those intakes, cats and dogs are the same. And so this is a complex issue, right? There's length of stay is just one indicator of burden on a shelter and doesn't account for behavior or medical issues. But in the policy space, we're often so focused on big dogs of certain breeds, and for good reason. But taking this 30,000-foot view of this population can give us new insights, like how much cats are impacted by housing. Next slide. And the last piece of the data that I wanted to share today, and we will be doing having a lot more conversations about this data. This is just the first bite at this apple. Is a deeper look into the population of animals that were relinquished due to these unspecified buckets. Again, you see the intake by species is pretty similar to the overall population. But when you look at the pie chart on the right and you see the breakdown of dogs relinquished due to unspecified reasons, it's really notable that toy and small breeds make up almost a third of this population. And of course, because data collection is pretty inconsistent or somewhat inconsistent at this point, we do have that 23% of dogs where their size wasn't identified. So that would change the breakdowns, but it does open up questions of why are these pets being relinquished if it's not due to breed or size. Next slide. And so just some preliminary highlights from this data, almost 40% of pets relinquished due to housing are cats, which means that cats need to be a much bigger part of our conversation about housing issues. Megan's story from earlier definitely reiterated that. And then as I mentioned before, I think that the number of dogs in particular that are relinquished that are small or toy breeds indicates a need for policy changes beyond breed or size restrictions. And then, of course, what is obvious is that we have a significantly greater need for more specific housing intake reason data collection, and Haas is diligently working on that. It's one of our big goals for 2024, so we'll be excited to share those results. Next slide. All of this to me, this data, all the information you've heard from Megan and Ben today indicate to me that our movements, which are historically siloed into housing, tenants' rights, and companion animal welfare, need to be working together more closely. And I think we're seeing glimpses of this shift in the amazing work that the animal welfare world is already doing in pet policies, particularly those related to pet-related costs, so that financial burden, and the policies that are advocating for pets to be allowed in housing to begin with. And next slide. So I want to make the argument today that we need to shift that even further, because advocating for tenants' rights is going to end up saving pets and protecting that bond between people and the pets they love. And I don't have time to go into this entire slide today, but what I want to point out, would be an illustration of two different renters, one from Arkansas, which is notoriously tenant unfriendly, and one from Vermont, which is known for being the most tenant-friendly state in the country. And if you look at the differences in how non-pet specific policies, so policies around whether or not a tenant can withhold rent if their landlord does not provide that warranty of habitability, if there is even a requirement for a warranty of habitability, what eviction processes are like, when tenants have to get their security deposits back. All of those tenant-specific policies ultimately end up impacting whether or not a person has to is in a position of needing to relinquish their pet or not. And in a situation, a hypothetical situation where you have a very tenant unfriendly state and a very tenant protective state, and the pet policies are all exactly as we would love them, you are going to have so many tenants who are unable to keep their pets, regardless of the fact that there might be no breed or size restrictions allowed in housing, for example. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So I really want to reiterate that when you are, as an animal welfare organization, starting to try and engage more effectively in tenants' rights advocacy, animal welfare folks do not need to be reinventing this wheel. You heard from Ben all the fantastic work they're doing. So as an animal welfare organization or advocate, one of the best things you can do is sign up to receive your updates and legislative alerts from your local or state tenants' rights and affordable housing groups. Then when you take action as an individual or as an organization, depending on what you're capable, legally allowed to do, when you take action and you're writing to your lawmaker in support of a bill that, for example, Texas Housers has identified as a priority, you can then use your position there to bridge that gap and explain to your lawmaker why this bill matters to companion animal welfare. Build intersectional relationships. This can be as simple as setting up a meeting to chat with the folks who are in tenants' rights or legal services in your community, discuss their programmatic or legislative agenda, and explain to them why your organization supports that work, and ask to be kept informed of opportunities to support them. And then a big one I think that we really need to focus on, and I see it in the questions today about how do we get rid of breed restrictions? We need to be talking about bigger issues than that. Not that they're not important, because they are so important, but use your social media platform to educate your followers on the relationship between tenants' rights and housing. Invite local tenants' rights advocates to live stream and have conversations on your platform, and use housing first and housing justice and equity language to normalize that this is a much broader issue that we're engaging in and not just about pet policies. Next slide. And then a very quick reference to a few opportunities and opportunities that HOS has available to assist this. So in the last year and a half, I've drafted testimony in several states, making this connection between why an animal welfare organization is writing and testifying in support of traditional tenants' rights issues like right to counsel during an eviction, source of income discrimination, or right to cure lease provisions. We also have two toolkits, the HOS Eviction Response Toolkit and the HOS Government Communications Toolkit, which I talked a little bit more about in our December webinar. And then I am always available to come and do more in-depth trainings for your staff or your community on the history of affordable housing and racial discrimination in particular in your community, and housing injustice more broadly, how it creates resource deserts for people and their pet, which Ben mentioned, and I wish I had time to share today. And importantly, how to articulate this why for animal welfare advocates. So that's all I have today. Thank you all so much for your time, and Ben and Megan for joining us and for sticking with us for a few minutes over. We really appreciate y'all's engagement on this topic.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, Megan, Ben. This has been a terrific webinar. And we are a little bit over, so and I am making sure, Sarah, that I see the rapid fire questions, but I don't see where they're highlighted.
Yes, one moment for me. Pop it in the chat for you.
Vincent, if I might really quickly, somebody asked a question about how do we find the organizations, and that would like to, first off, if you just Google tenants' rights or tenants union in your state or your county or city, you'll find somebody. But also the National Low Income Housing Coalition has a whole website where you can search for those partners at the state level. So check out the National Low Income Housing Coalition. We'll send out the link to that page in our follow-up so that y'all can find them as well, because that's a great question.
And that was the question about finding animal welfare advocates.
Tenants' rights advocates.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's another question on what are your top resources or action items on how animal welfare advocates get involved with existing advocacy. And that's for all of you.
Megan, you want to go first?
I'm so sorry. I was looking at things. What was the question, Vincent?
Oh, yes. The question is, what is your top resource or action item for how animal welfare advocates can get involved with existing advocacy?
Got it. I mean, for me on a social work level, it's really down to the basics of education. Educating landlords, educating the community about pets, one about that human animal connection so that people understand why we're all so passionate about what we're passionate about, as well as just teaching them about the laws that relate to pets and in the home. I think landlords, property managers, motels, shelters all just need to really get in there and work on that. And I think bringing social workers into the mix can be a really insightful and new way to do this, because we're just, like I said earlier, we have a different lens than other people. And so it could be great to bring that lens in.
Right.
I want to build on what Lauren was saying about connecting with your local tenants' rights or low-income housing organization. Second, what Lauren said about National Low-Income Housing Coalition and their state partner network being a great place to try to identify folks. One step beyond that is ask those organizations, do they have Know Your Rights pamphlets or Know Your Rights information? And then if you're an organization that does direct service or interacts with people who you find are facing housing stability, to figure out how to operationalize that information within your organization. How can you share that information out and bridge in that way?
All right. Okay, well, that concludes all of our questions for tonight. This has been a great webinar. Thank you, panelists, for being part of it. Lauren, Megan, and Ben. There's a brief survey for you to, or poll for you to fill out. Please do that. Also, and if you don't get, if we didn't get to your question, you can email it to haas.project@americanpetsalive.org. As a reminder, tonight's webinar recording will be distributed within 3 business days. Remember to take the poll and subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on the details of our next webinar. And my team will share a link for you to sign up in the chat. Thank you for tonight. We'll see you again soon. Keep a lookout in your email if you already are subscribed to our website. Thank you all for being here tonight, and have a great rest of the week.